So first of all, right off the bat, I changed the title of my talk. Standing out from the demo crowd felt more like it was going to be a talk about what publishers could do to make people want to pick up their demos and play it. That's really not what this talk is about. This talk is about once you get the demo, a game demo into the player's hands, how can you ensure that they're having a great experience, that they're learning what's great about your game, that they get excited about your game, so that then they go out and buy your game and have a great experience with it. In addition, just some other kind of preface things up front. The focus for my research was on boxed copies or retail, or demos for boxed copy or retail games, not necessarily those games that might appear on things like Xbox Live, Arcade, those type of things. That being said, I don't think that the conclusions that I draw are necessarily limited to those titles, but there are some things that may not be applicable to that as well, just kind of setting the scope of what I'm doing. The other thing is that I'm going to show you some video from some demos that I tested and players' response to those videos, sometimes, or to those games. Sometimes the response is positive, sometimes it's not so positive. My goal here is not to necessarily pick on those games or point them out as this is bad and these people were stupid. Putting together demos happens, as we all know, at the end of the development cycle when everyone's crunching, trying to get the title out. My goal is to help you see some of the mistakes that get made when we go about and try and make these demos so that you can avoid them, rather than point at any particular title. So who am I and why am I doing this talk? First of all, by training, I'm an experimental psychologist. That's not lay on the couch and tell me your feelings kind of psychologist. That's attach electrodes to people and shock them and see how they respond kind of psychologist. Turns out the electrode thing is considered unethical now, so I dropped out of the academic part of that and started as a usability engineer. Usability engineers basically work with designers and developers of technology and watch people using the technology and try and make that technology better fit to the end user or more user-friendly. In 2000, I joined the Games User Research Group at Microsoft Game Studios, where they were just starting up a usability program in games and trying to figure out how do we adapt these methodologies to support game design. So I stayed with them for about 5 years and worked on a variety of titles. Some did quite well, some did not so well, but worked on over a dozen games and then in management roles and other things throughout. A couple of years ago, my wife and I moved to Australia, and I took a little break from games, but recently joined UsabilityOne as their Playability Director, where I'm offering the same sort of services that we provided at Microsoft Game Studios, which is getting user feedback into game design in a constructive way that helps you improve your games. So why this talk? Why talk about demos? As I kind of step back and I look at kind of where we're at and where the future is going with how we decide, or how the typical consumer decides to purchase a game and how they go about making decisions of what they want to do, I'm seeing that the new consoles are really going to change the way consumers make these decisions. If you go right now and say Johnny Average buys Xbox 360 and plugs it in online, outside of Live Arcade, ignoring that, which has 100 titles that he can browse from and try demos from the retail side, retail games, there's over 130 choices that he has to try and play a game demo, decide does he want to buy this game. I think about back when I was younger and used to make game purchase decisions, I'd stand in the shop and just look at boxes and flip it over and then go to the next one and spend all day trying to figure it out. It's really going to change in the future, especially as online adoption continues to increase, and especially as the audience broadens for the next generation consoles. The second reason was that creating great demos often competes with creating great games on time. Again, I've worked with several product teams. I've been involved in the end crunch. I know what it's like when you're trying to get the game out the door and your marketing person is screaming at you for a demo. And I've been in many meetings where the developer's screaming back, do you want a game or do you want a demo? So hopefully there's some things here that can help streamline that a little bit. The other thing is that creating demos is actually incredibly difficult to do. And why it's hard is because you've got developers who've been working on a title for 2 years, maybe longer, and they're suddenly faced with the challenge of condensing what's great about this 20-hour experience, perhaps, down into a 30-minute experience that shows off everything that's great with the game, everything that's compelling without totally overwhelming the user or confusing the user. I think this is actually one of the hardest tasks. This, along with, I would say, really refining the initial experience of your game, which pretty much does the same thing as well. Methodology that I used, that I'm going to be talking about and I'll be showing you, is just an adaptation of traditional usability testing. I've been in a few talks and I've heard terms like focus testing and blind play testing, I believe. It's basically like that. You'll see in a second. Rather than me describe it, it might be easier just for me to show it to you. But it's basically bringing in customers into, or your target audience, into the design process, into the playtest process in a constructive way that you can get feedback from them that's actionable and helpful for you to improve your game. They're one-on-one sessions, again, with the target audience, and it's really about observing what they do. Of course, you get opinion data, but what really is helpful is seeing what they do. So opinion data will tell you this weapon sucks, but when you observe, what you really see is that, no, it's not the weapon that's the problem. The problem is that the user is engaging the AI from a distance, that the weapon was never intended to be effective. So the answer is, let's not fix the weapon. The answer is, let's find a way to get the right engagement distance between the player and the AI. Specifically, what we did is we brought people in and we gave them a list of game demos that we had downloaded to an Xbox 360 hard drive, and we just asked them to rate any games that they were interested in playing. We asked them if they played it only because we didn't want to get feedback on demos of games that they'd already played. And then we just asked them to go ahead and play the demos as if they were at home, to spend as long as they wanted on them, to spend as short of amount of time as they wanted, and we just watched what worked for them, what didn't work for them. We ran 14 people, and then summed up the data across all of them, and that's what I'll be presenting. We pretty much skewed the audience towards what might be considered the typical gamer audience, 18 to 26-year-old male, gamer, console owner, but we also tried to broaden the age a little bit. Had 3 women in the study to look at kind of what's it going to be like, what is the market going to be like 2 or 3 years from now. This is a setup, just to give you an idea. This was our kind of temporary setup. We're working on a more permanent setup right now. But basically, a participant sits here. This is not your target gamer. This is my colleague. Playing the game there, obviously. We're recording their face so that we can see, do they look puzzled, confused, happy, sad. I'm sitting right there beside them, moderating the session, asking appropriate follow-up questions, those kind of things. And behind us, what you can't see is a two-way mirror, one-way mirror. I'm not quite sure what the right terminology is, but a mirror that people can sit back there and then observe the sessions without disturbing the participant. All of that turns into basically this.